Learning piano can be one of the most enjoyable experiences in your life. It's a very long journey, and at the very beginning, there's a lot of mistakes that can be made. Today, Ted and I are going to highlight some of the most common mistakes made when learning the piano.
Hi, this is Ted with Alamo Music Center in beautiful downtown San Antonio, Texas.
And I'm Patrick Marr. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube channels, check out our other videos, sign up for notifications, like our videos, leave us comments. We love to interact with you and we appreciate all your support. Well, Ted, this is a great topic because every day there's more people in the world that say, I want to learn to play piano, or I want my kids to learn, and they decide to take that first step and make an investment in whether it's their time, their money, their energies. They want to take that leap, that step into music. And I always applaud them because one of the things that I hear most commonly hear, one of the things I always hear from adults, they come in and they go, oh man, I wish my parents would have stuck with it and made me stick with it, and I wish that I'd stuck with it and progressed and really taken the time.
Right.
And it's funny because if you think about journeys for kids and you think about starting points in their life, when they're young, they're learning teams, so they're learning sports, they're learning activities. They're picking up knowledge. Their brains are sponges, and it's always funny to hear at some point down the line they can't play sports anymore, or
Right.
our bodies age, and it's not as fun to do some of these high intensity things, and then we hear.
I hear a lot getting tackled.
Oh, I know, and it's no fun. But then you listen to we just did a lab of piano keyboards in a retirement home here in San Antonio, and it's funny because music is something that you can start at some of the earliest ages and continue to your last breath. And so it's fun to talk about the journey, to talk about the excitement of music and what it can mean to somebody's life. And it's cool to see. If people are watching this, that you're thinking about making that investment, but it's very common to run into some roadblocks along the way.
Sure, and it's funny that you mentioned athletics and music, because a lot of times with the families and the upbringing of children, they want them to have music. The kids want to have music, but let's face it, traditional piano lessons can be boring. It's nowhere near as exciting as basketball or organized sports, and that's one thing that piano does not have going for it, is everyone remembers playing any kind of organized sports, whether it was basketball, baseball, or soccer, team, school, or little league. There isn't anything that's organized for piano like that. Like they don't have like little kid jam sessions where you put your bands together and you go out and play. Even ballet and dance that they have for girls, they have recitals. And now they do have piano recitals, but that involves having to put on a suit, and that's not the same thing as a football helmet.
And the grandparents are coming
and the
in.
grandparents, and then it turns into like a formal luncheon, which no kid ever really likes.
Yeah, so we're going to highlight top 8 mistakes that people make when learning piano.
Oh, number one's got to be the teacher. Right, wrong, or indifferent teacher. That would be my guess.
And this can be a whole giant arrangement of issues. So if you're looking for a teacher, it's really important to have a conversation with them, to hear their kind of, for more or less of a better word, philosophy on music and what they see as growth in kids and kind of how long they've been doing it. Getting a little bit more than just what's your price.
Right.
That I feel like when looking for an instrument, we're looking for a teacher. A lot of the question is, well, how much are your lessons? How much do you charge? How much do you charge? And we hear this phone call. We get this phone call. And I think it's important to slow down and realize that might not be the most important question. Of course, it is an important question. What are you going to be paying for these lessons? But when you're looking for the right teacher and someone who's going to be sitting with your kid once a week, whether it's virtual or in person, I think it's very important to realize that there's actually chemistry there and that there's a good balance of goal.
There should also be some visible progress, okay? And the other thing you want to make sure is that the student has their attention and their focus on their lesson, and that when they practice, they're at least doing their lessons and picking up the skill.
Yeah.
And some of the things you want to be on the lookout for is complete loss of interest. That means there's something, the chemistry's not right between the student and the teacher, Or a lot of times you'll notice a student is highly motivated, but the teacher's not giving them enough to do. So he's trying to find ways to do shortcuts, and he learns it really fast, and he's not given enough to do. So there's a lot of students like that, and that's usually the younger one in the house if there's a bunch.
Well,
of them.
it's funny because kids are so smart, and
Right.
they'll find ways around,
Absolutely.
and they'll circumvent, and it's funny to see how clever kids can be to not practice piano.
Right.
But yeah, so wrong teacher is our number one on the list. There are amazing teachers in every city. These teachers are a lot of the times underpaid, underthanked, but they're beacons of light for the music community.
They're all dedicated too. That's the other thing too. I've yet to find an undedicated music teacher.
Yeah, and so making sure it might not be that there's anything wrong with that teacher, but that there's a disconnection between your kid or yourself and that teacher is something you need to be on the lookout for. So wrong teacher is our number one. Number two, commitment. Lack of commitment. One of the most common things that we hear, I don't know if they're going to stick with it.
Yeah, that I don't know if they're going to stick with it. You know, if I knew for a fact they were going to stick with it, well, then I'd buy the $10,000 piano instead of the $2,000.
Well, and it's funny because a lot of the times this is said in the exact same area as the kids standing right next to the parents, and they're hearing their parents say, I don't know if they're going to stick with it. You know, they did ballet last year, they didn't like it. They did football, they did soccer. They don't like it anymore. The kids are always looking for the next adventure, and a lot of the times music can be a very big investment of time and resources into your child and into their education. And I think it's important to be as committed as your child is if you are looking for a commitment in piano specifically, because that's what we're talking about here. But in music in general, it's a two-way commitment. It's actually more ways than that, but commitment from the kid. If you're looking for them to enjoy music and stick with it, there needs to be commitment on both ends, I think, a lot of the times, and there's a lack of that.
Well, you have to value the commitment of the student. And so, like in a pristine environment, you would have someone, hey, I want to learn to play the piano. So they go out and they get a new piano, they get a new teacher, and they have all this motivation to do everything so that the commitment is 100% back. There are other ways to back that same thing. It doesn't have to be a brand new piano. It doesn't have to be the most expensive one. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times when someone wants to play like sports, for example, the first thing you do is go out and buy the kid a complete set of football pads, right? Mm-hmm. You know, you get a football, you start tossing around a baseball, and then you add a glove. Even buying a baseball glove takes a while. Yeah. So you got to figure out what position. You buy a very expensive fielder's glove and you find out your kid wants to be catcher because he likes to wear all this stuff. Yeah,
you're back to square one.
Because when he's bigger, he wants to be a hockey player.
And so I think, and with that commitment, I think there's opportunities to, have a conversation with your kid, with yourself. And what it does is it creates accountability to the goal. And so having that goal, having that commitment is, I think, one of the most important things right there with having the right teacher. It's very important to have that conversation and say, look, we're making an investment here, and we really know that this is going to improve not only the way you learn, but your talents in many ways. And having that conversation saying, we're going to make a commitment here, but I need you to commit for X amount of years. I need you to at least practice through the end of the year. And you can come to the table and have a negotiation, if you will, either with yourself, if you're making this commitment with yourself, or with your child, or the person who's going to be taking lessons. I think you were alluding to our next one when you were talking about equipment and what's right. I think number 3 on our list here is going to be the wrong instrument.
That can make a real big difference. Mm-hmm. It really can. If we found this piano in a barn and now my kid wants to learn how to play it, should I get it tuned or just get him into lessons? And if the instrument is out of tune, broken, and not working right, well, then the student's going to have a hard time following all of the instructions. And part of the instructions is when they hit a key, they get the notes back through the touch and the tone and the pitch. So they start learning the vibration through your fingertips and the tone. So if it's out of tune, it's not going to help a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, the dynamic controls, the ear training of hearing if these notes sound good together, what they do sound like together, it all comes together at a point with the instrument and with the player. And it's a lot of the times if you go to a music store and you start asking about what's the right instrument for my kid, of course you're gonna hear probably some sort of sales pitch. And I think it's important to hear that because there are benefits that you're going to hear from the sales pitch. But I also think it's important to talk to that teacher, get another perspective. talk to a technician, a piano technician, if you are looking at acoustic instruments. But it's important to get outside perspectives, especially if you're unfamiliar with piano or unfamiliar with keyboards. It's sometimes very important to realize where is the necessity in an instrument, and if you are going to be spending, lessons aren't cheap. If you're spending $100+ a month on lessons, and you're doing it for 3 years, how much money did you just invest in lessons? And if you bought a $100 keyboard to go along with those lessons, the ratio is way off on investment into lessons versus the instrument that's going to be giving back to the player that they're actually sitting with, that you're sitting with. Whoever is going to be playing, I think it's important to have that right instrument and to have that conversation not only with the instructor, but also be doing research and finding the right instrument.
Right. Absolutely. And, you know, like a lot of times that the younger children, that first instrument they have, it'd be nice if it had a metronome and a drum machine built into it so they can start learning the parameters of rhythm instead of having to count and do fractional math when they're 4 and 5 years old.
Yeah.
It's built into the beat.
So we've looked at the wrong teacher, that's number 1 on our list. Lack of commitment, that's number 2. Wrong instruments, number 3. Number 4 is another wrong, and it's the wrong environment.
Right. A lot of times there are group classes, and that is great for like college level. Like in order to get your humanities credit, well, I took class piano. Everyone used to take class piano 30 years ago because you could learn some chords and how to play it and play scales, and there wasn't any strict musical requirements, just overall familiar with some kind of instrument.
And they've taken that idea and they've brought it to classrooms too. I mean, it's no. There's music teachers from 3rd, 4th grade, even kindergarten. Right. They're in bringing music into the school, and that environment can be cool and can be a neat learning experience for children, especially if it's one of those things where we're not sure what they're going to be or what instrument we want to invest in. We're not sure of all these things. Sometimes group lessons can invite influence.
Invite and separate. You know, right away you may have a look at, I want to play the violin. I don't want to play the piano. But they'll fool with it, but they're not going to take it real serious.
Yeah.
So you can have a lot of students ones that want to think, hey man, I could probably really I'd like to do this the rest of my life. They're going to gravitate and come out through a class.
Yeah, and so
class.
There are group lessons, and it's not something that we necessarily recommend right off the bat. But they are available. Sometimes you can get a better rate putting them in a group, having them with kids their same age. There can be a lot of fun and a lot of some sort of that team element that's sometimes missing from music. If you're not in a band, if you're not performing, it can incorporate that. But individual lessons is primarily what we recommend to probably 9 out of 10 people. It's what fits the bill. But looking at the right environment when it comes to choosing what if we want to go to a music studio, if we want them to come to our house, if we're going to do a group lesson. Right now, environment can be digital because we're, of course, still in COVID-19 protocol, and it's important to have lessons. Piano lessons are still happening, and a lot of teachers have switched to technology-based lessons and having Zoom calls happening and being able to teach all digitally online. And then there's YouTube channels that will teach piano. And so realizing the different mediums that can happen, the different environments that can happen is important, in choosing the right one for not yourself or your child, but just what will make sense and continue that learning process.
I've seen a lot of students like a non-traditional way of learning piano. And in fact, there's a couple that are players that are self-taught. And really, if you think about it, most things in life are self-taught. You have to spend time alone learning it on your own. You have a teacher or a coach to kind of guide you along the way. But some of these students that have only watched videos and learned how to play the piano can play some remarkable things.
Oh, it's incredible.
It is really incredible.
It's like a new way to learn. And so that kind of brings us into this next one, no fun. The mistake of I'm not having fun anymore, my kid's not having fun anymore. This is like a pulling back and forth every time I want to get them to practice.
I'll give you an example of that. Make a student repeat something 20 times in a row until they work the bugs out. They're not going to want to do that. That's going to put the pressure on the kid. However, they'll try to do it 30 or 40 times on their own with a video until they get it perfected.
And so this is one of those things that it's a symptom, and you might not be the doctor, and you not be able to say, okay, my kid's having no fun, it must be because X, Y, or Z. There's a whole bunch of questions, I think, that need to be asked at that time. And really, you can kind of find the answer in some of these ones that we've already talked about. Maybe there's the wrong instrument at this point. Maybe it's the wrong teacher. Maybe it's the wrong environment. But the experience has become no fun at this point.
Yeah, because I wanted to play the piano, okay? I didn't want to sit and have to look at dots and lines on a page and learn this foreign language and get a headache and have to memorize all this stuff. That I don't care for. This part here I like a lot. So
It's important.
find me a teacher that doesn't want to teach me music but how to play the instrument.
And so this is, it's one of those, I think it's very key in that question or in that comment that we get all the time from people who come in. Oh, I wish I would have stuck with it. I wish my parents would have pushed me to stick with it. I think this is the key element that is missing a lot of the times is they're not listening for when it stops being fun for the student or for yourself. And at that point, I think it's asking more questions, figuring out what is not fun. Is it the very monotonous going through and reading and practicing?
You know what's really neat is when you take someone that is just beginning piano and they complain about not liking the music and stuff like that, and you say, okay, well let me show you how to play the piano without any music, and so you show them some chords and they learn to do something real quick, a heart and soul or something.
Yeah.
And they're all fascinated. However, you take them to, a digital piano and you record it and then you show them the music of them playing it. See, that's what you're doing. That's what it looks like on paper. Well, then all of a sudden there's a different interest because they realize this was easy to do, but looking at it there makes it look hard. And it's almost like piano's taught the wrong way. You're going to teach them how to read music and then how to put that music on these keys as opposed to here's the keys and this is what it looks like when you're finished. In other words, kind of reverse the process a little bit, especially for the younger ones, because it retains that fascination of learning.
Yeah. So be on the lookout for the no fun. It does happen. It's with learning anything and spending time on it. There's going to be friction when it comes to a place where something has to change, and a lot of times it's something that you're going to have to ask some questions to diagnose what's actually happening. The next one on our list is practice. And to me, it's easiest explained when you think of practice and performance, and you think of what are the reasons that we have these two things, and how do we trick our mind to practice more so that we perform better.
Right.
And a lot of the times it goes back to commitment and the easiest regimen to imagine is working out. So if you want to run a marathon, if you want to be able to play this really hard piece, classical piece, or jazz piece, or pop piece, whatever your goal is, if you're not willing to do the small steps, if you want to run a marathon, you're not going to go out tomorrow and try to run 23 miles. You're going to 26 miles. So you're going to start in small steps, and you're going to commit every day to doing something that's going to improve and take you to that goal. And whether you make progress that day or not is not the overall goal. The goal is to commit the time. It comes back to commitment. But knowing that if you're going to be practicing, you're going to have to sit down and practice. And just making that a repetition, making that part of your everyday rhythm, making that a part of your kid's everyday thing. It's not going to be fun sometimes, but committing that time and practicing, I think, is so important. And a lot of the times, the mistake we see is they practice once or twice between lessons. The real practice is when they go and sit in front of the teacher and struggle through a piece. I'm speaking from experience here.
That's everyone's experience. Is that the day before they start dreading, oh no, tomorrow's piano lessons. I haven't practiced all week, and I've got at least a week's worth of things to learn that I've put off, and that's not a good feeling.
It's not.
But why is it that a student will continue and want to do better the next week and better the next week, even though it may be the same type of thing? There's a drive to want to be better, but there has to be some way to get through the monotony of the repetition that's required.
Yeah. And so, top mistakes so far, just to recap. We've gone through the wrong teacher, lack of commitment, having no goal or commitment set for that, and accountability follows that. The wrong instrument. It's important to make sure that you have the right instrument. If you're spending all this money on lessons and all that. We got the wrong environment. If they're learning, maybe your kid is more hands-on and needs a teacher in home where you're comfortable on an instrument, or maybe at a lesson studio, maybe online. lack of fun, no fun, has been given out. And then what we just talked about, practicing. It's so important. Next one that we're going to bring up is, and this is to save you from if you've made these mistakes before. I think this is like a time value of money, sunk cost, right? It's if you've done any of these things and you're banging your head against the wall, it's not too late to make a change. And so I think it's very important to realize you've done these things. Maybe you have the wrong teacher. Maybe you have the wrong instrument. And a lot of times people will go, okay, I'm done. Like this, I'm giving up at this point because I've already spent a lot of money on this, or I've already spent money on lessons. But really, at the end of the day, that same response is going to happen later in life. I wish I would have stuck with it. And so being able to say, I've made a mistake, that's okay. How do I fix it? And it's okay to fix it.
Well, a lot of times I do remind particularly the young families when they come in and they're starting off on this journey of learning the piano, and the children, although they're young, they know it's going to be something that's going to be there all the time. I always tell the parents, remember, they have school, they have sports, they have other things in life. And those other things in life have a schedule. There's a school year. It's from like August to May. Mm-hmm. And then there's a sports season, like there's baseball in the summer and then football in the winter. Everything has a beginning and an end time. So it's important that on a repetitive basis, they get time away from the requirement of having to practice piano every single day of their life, whether it's summertime, Christmas, holidays, no matter what it is. Give them a month or two off every summer because they're going to be doing this for the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. You don't need to pound it into them, every single day. They'll find a way, and you'll find out after a couple of years, well, this one was doing great until he was valedictorian, and then he quit practicing piano, but now he's going to college on a scholarship. Yeah. Okay, so there's some other ways that the commitment has to be 10, 12 years. And so when they come in with, 6 and 8 year old, that kid's not thinking about moving out of the house. But you remind his parents that when they're coming in on a piano lesson. By the time he moves out of the house, goes to college, you may be going on a scholarship.
And it's funny because sometimes when you see that commitment come late in life, they're like, okay, they finally got to this level. We're going to get them a nice instrument now. And they're going to be gone out of the house in a year.
Right.
And it's right. Really funny. Our final mistake, number 8, is self-taught. And I know this sounds tricky because a lot of times motivating yourself, teaching yourself can be a very powerful thing. Music, on the other hand, can be very difficult to push through that initial barrier. And so if you haven't learned a musical instrument before, I would highly recommend spending a little bit of money, spending time researching musical instruments, music theory, figuring out how do I want to learn, what do I want to learn, and what is the best way to learn that. Because a lot of times we have people who are like, oh, I self-taught, and they're completely lost in the dark. And there's people who spend their entire job teaching music. And those are the music teachers out there, piano teachers, music educators. Some of the, like we had talked about earlier, it's very important to have the right one in your life. But some people are so anti that they're like, right. I want to self-teach myself. And I applaud the effort there, but I just know quitting music is something that people do all the time. They are like, after a year of struggling through, they're like, oh, I bought that guitar, I bought that piano. I tried to teach myself. I learned a few things and got very frustrated and hit a breaking point, or they learned the chords and then they didn't know what to do at that point. And it's hard because there's not that guiding light,
Right.
And whether it's a mentor, an older brother, sibling that's going to be a teacher and have that formal relationship with you, I think it's very important to have somebody in your life that can help you, because self-teaching is it's very difficult.
Well, most things in life, whether we want to admit it or not, are self-taught. Mm-hmm. I mean, you get a degree in literature, you go to a college and they tell you what books to read, then you have to read them. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like you can, like running a mile, someone can do it for you. I mean, you got to do it yourself.
Yeah.
And so, self-taught is the ideal thing of self-taught is, hey, man, I've got 10 honorary degrees, and, Oxford is one of them, and so are these other respected schools. Why do they give an honorary degree? Because they're recognizing this guy knows a lot of stuff, and no one ever really had to sign on for a course or give him a degree. He learned it all on his own.
The school of hard knocks.
The school of hard knocks. And so you see a lot of that, people's education, they'll list that on their Facebook page, School of Hard Knocks. That means they're self-taught. Mm-hmm. And self-taught piano is great, but a lot of times you'll see wrong fingerings, and you can tell a lot about someone that's playing. So it is. I always encourage people, if you're self-taught, play with as many musicians as you can and people that are better than you, and so that you can learn something from them.
Yeah.
And learning piano self-taught is I kind of like guys that are self-taught on piano because they approach the instrument in a different way.
Well, yeah, and it's
And
not.
they write in a different way.
I don't think you can't be self-taught on the eventual journey, but I think the initial obstacles are so many right at the beginning.
Oh yes.
Trying to read a book and say, okay, it says hit this middle C here, and then follow the E and the G, and then you learn chords or however you learn that way. It can be incredibly difficult if you don't have a mentor, if you don't have that teacher. And so self-teaching yourself, like dedicating your time, energies to writing and stuff, that I'm all fine for that down the journey.
Right.
But I think those initial steps of saying, I want to learn, it can be very difficult if you don't have a reference point.
It would be great if you were a teacher of any subject and you received a phone call for someone that says, I've been self-taught for 5 or 6 years, and well, I don't want to think I'm really an expert, but I'd like someone to help me become an expert. As a teacher, you think, hey man, this dude's motivated. This guy wants to come in here, he's going to ask hard questions. I probably won't have to teach him anything, just coach him and mentor him.
Exactly.
And not have to bust out a Chopin piece and make him play it perfect all the way through. So there's some advantages to that too.
Yeah. And so these are the top mistakes that we wanted to highlight. Again, the list, if we can recite it in order. Number 1 is the wrong teacher. Again, we think it's very important to find the right fit. And it might not be because the teacher's bad. It just might be the wrong connection. Second is lack of commitment, making sure that not only the player, yourself, or your kid commits to what they want to be learning, but also kind of there's a support system. There's a support system that's also committing. The wrong instrument, I think it's very important to realize the instrument goes a long way in this journey. And it's sometimes the unspoken hero in this journey. And having the right thing that is a creation machine be there for whoever the player is very, very important. Wrong environment, whether that's online, whether that's in a studio, and teachers coming to your house, I think it's important to find the right atmosphere for you to learn or for your kids to learn. I know we're going to forget some here, but practicing was one of them.
Practice was the next.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you're practicing. You want to make sure that you're having fun. I think a lot of the times people get, this journey can be so difficult at first, and that first year is the hardest. The 6 months to a year is the hardest part of that journey. And if you give up at any point in that, you'll regret it forever. I know I've heard this so many times, or you'll try to get back into it at some point, and it's lost progress. Knowing that you can change at any time, and find the right teacher, find the right instrument, and still power through and motivate yourself to do those things, to practice more. There's sunk costs behind you, so look forward as a blank slate. Also, make sure that if you are going to self-teach yourself, I think there's a whole bunch of hazards in doing that, and we would recommend finding a teacher, at least doing a couple introductory lessons to get familiar with how a piano operates. I know it seems simple. You should hit a key and it sounds back to you, but kind of navigating the world of music and music theory, I think it's very important to have a mentor or someone who can challenge you.
The one thing I'd say on the last thing of self-taught is a returning adult student is probably going to be best off with just a mentor coach, because it's kind of like riding a bike. If you could play at one time, you can still play again. You're just going to be a little rusty. So self-taught with just some coaching and mentoring, and we've had a number of adult students that are returning, come back, buy a great instrument because they have children now, and it's like, I'm going to rededicate to myself. I'll pick up where I was at when I was younger.
Well, those are our top mistakes. We hope you guys avoid them, because it can be very frustrating sometimes when learning piano or when your kids are learning. This is Ted Barstow. I'm Patrick Marr. We're with Alamo Music Center in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online. Our website's alamomusic.com, where we have a chat agent available. If you have any questions about what might be the right instrument or who's a good teacher in your area, you can always come to our website, ask some questions. Hopefully we can help you guys out. Again, please subscribe to our YouTube channels. We have multiple. Sign up for notifications, like our videos, leave us comments. It really helps us with support, and we really appreciate all of that. Thanks for watching.